In a world where vampires stalk the shadows, preying on humanity like an unrelenting plague, Richter Belmont's worst nightmare comes true tonight. The year is 1783. He and his mother, Julia Belmont, are hastily making their way towards a ship bound for France. That is, until the formidable vampire lord, Ulrox, emerges from the shadows and engages young Julia in combat. You see, these Belmonts come from a long and legendary line of vampire hunters. And apparently, Julia killed Ulrox's shoddy back in the day, so he's here for some sweet payback. Telling Richter to dash for the ship, Julia pulls out the signature Belmont S and M whip and engages Ulrox in combat. What ensues next is a deadly bout of melee combat, dancing around Ulrox in an elegant display of superior martial skill and battle IQ. Richter, being the snot-nosed brat he is, Richter repeatedly fails to obey his mother's orders to run for the ship, instead taunting Ulrox about how his mom will ruin him. I mean, she can ruin me if it's on the table. Before long, she has the vampire on the ropes, gripped within her whip and burning the crispy shit out of him. Unfortunately, that just gives Ulrox the opportunity to shift into his animal form, which is that of a giant red-maned serpent. Because, you know, bats are so last century. Even in this new form, Julia would have likely been able to handle Ulrox quite well, but that's not something we ever get to see, because little Richter thinks he's him and tries to get in on the action. Spoiler, he just messes everything up. With Julia now splitting her focus between the battle and protecting her son, the hunter is caught completely unaware by Snake Ulrox's surprise attack from behind. The image of Ulrox piercing his mother is burned into Richter's mind, and he is left paralyzed with fear. Even though Richter is now a pretty easy target, Ulrox does not harm him. At least not tonight. Instead, the devious vampire tells Richter that he will savor killing him at another time, and thus, the cat-and-mouse chase between predator and prey shall commence. 9 years after the death of his mother, Richter finds himself in France. He is part of a revolutionary group led by a girl named Maria Renard, apart from being the obvious romantic partner for Richter. Maria's main goal in life is to lead a group of revolutionaries so that they can take down the vampires who seem to have entered the pretentious high society of France, because even vampires cannot seem to resist the bourgeoisie. As Maria delivers a heartfelt speech about revolution and courage to her band of very weak and scared-looking peasants, the group is attacked by vampires. The attack was premeditated and catches everyone by surprise. However, this is the type of action Richter is always looking for, because it allows him to show off his fighting skills. Due to his tragic past, not only has Richter become incredibly hot, but he is now also super adept at taking down vampires. He makes use of his mother's whip to brutally hack the vampires into pieces, and while the choice of weapon definitely raises an eyebrow, it cannot be denied that Richter knows how to efficiently slice through his enemies. Meanwhile, Maria also uses her unique magical abilities to summon birds that aid her in battle. It seems like Maria and Richter are the only ones truly capable of fighting, and the rest of the so-called revolutionaries only stare with their eyes wide with horror once the vampires have been taken care of. Maria advises the group to pack up their meeting and head back to the city. Apparently, the city is also rife with strange rumors and a sense of danger, and the revolutionaries have to be careful with their movements. On the way back from the camp, Richter shares with Maria that before he killed one of the vampires, the fodder enemy had the decency to reveal the arrival of a vampire messiah who shall come before the moon is full, the devourer of light itself, who will eat the sun. This information could be quite crucial for the plan ahead. And Richter believes that they should confer with the abbot, a man of the church. Even though Maria does not trust the abbot, she decides to put aside her petty differences. And the duo heads off towards the heavily guarded church, where the abbot is currently praying. It is curious that a man of the church would require such an extensive security protocol. But Richter and Maria manage to secure a meeting with the abbot, and they begin to relay the details of the vampire attack. They also mention how it appears that the undead creatures have been swarming at the Marquise's chateau, which suggests that the influential individual has some involvement in all this underground shit. The abbot dismisses these theories as false, but after some coaxing from Maria, he agrees to use some of his spies to find out what is going on. Meanwhile, back in town, a poor, wasted fool on his way from the pub meets his end in unfortunate circumstances. A female vampire baddie traps him on the street, and the two share a passionate makeout session. Except, I'm pretty sure the vampire's the only one who enjoys it. She then drags his unconscious body to the Marquise's chateau, where the nobleman sinks his impressive fangs into the man and enjoys a bit old red as well. The guy's body is then thrown upon a pile of other humans, all of whom appear to have had the life sucked out of them, quite literally. Back at Maria's abode, her mother Tara has prepared a scrumptious dinner for her daughter and Richter. However, family time is interrupted by the sounds of commotion outside, at the source of which the most bizarre night creatures in existence. These are reanimated corpses fused with a large dose of dark magic straight from hell. Even Richter has never seen anything like them before, but the four creatures sure put up a fight. Even the combined forces of Maria, Tara, and Richter are not quite enough, but fortunately, two new individuals show up and kill one of the beings, scaring the rest of them away. They introduce themselves as Annette and Edouard from the Caribbean and explain that these beasts are the work of a necromancer. Additionally, the duo is here to recruit the assistance of Richard Belmont. Meanwhile, in the western French region of Nantes, our diva queen Olrox has finally made a reappearance. A monumental shift is taking place in France, and Paris is at the forefront. Even the abbot has begun to mention a mysterious savior in his sermons, who would end blasphemy and bring forth the word of God once and for all. How very medieval of him. All that France needs is a reenactment of the Black Plague, and I think we're good to go. A carriage is stopped at the gates of Paris by the royal guards, who demand to see some ID. Unfortunately for him, I don't think vampires do ID. A vampire baddie steps out of the carriage in wild 5-inch platforms and sinks her equally long fingernails right into the guard's gut, sending blood flying in all directions. With an evil smile, she introduces herself as a representative of the glorious Messiah. Meanwhile, back at Maria's household, Annette fills the group on what has brought her to France. Apparently, her priestess sensed a change in the world and advised the girl to track down a boy in France who goes by the name of Belmont and continue her quest with him. She was leading a revolution of her own back home, where she had slaughtered many a slave owner due to her enchantments, but decided that the greater good of the world should now be prioritized. Annette's priestess had also mentioned the Messiah, who would appear under the name of Erzsébeth Bathory. Upon hearing this name, all blood seems to drain from Tara's face, and she begins to freak out. Without explaining anything, she runs away from the group. Well. Seems like our boy Richter isn't the only one hiding a dark past. Back in Paris, the female vampire Drolta Tsuentes is welcomed into a massive palace where 3 beautiful maidens are presented before her. Sinking her fangs into the neck of the first one, this kinky spawn of devil cannot hide a smile and announces that the girl would be perfect for the Messiah. The group eventually track down Tara in the forest and comfort her. The woman reveals that many years ago, when she was in Russia, her village was attacked by a gang of thugs led by Erzsébeth and Drolta. Chaos ensued, with the majority of the village either getting slaughtered mercilessly on the spot or getting captured. Among the latter was Tara's sister, and it took days to track her down, but by then she was too late. Her sister had gone over to the dark side. With tears in her eyes, she stabbed her own sister and escaped. This story fills the team of revolutionists with resolve, and they plan to break into the Marquise's chateau that night. With a group of 4, they enter the premises, hiding behind a bush as they watch the epitome of French society enjoy their party. They suddenly notice a scene that would not be out of place in a horror film: a barrel of bodies being exchanged at the corner of the chateau. Annette recognizes a vampire, Vaublanc, who was her mother's killer, and unable to control herself, she summons her elemental powers. This commotion attracts the attention of these spawns from hell, leaving the revolutionists with no choice but to fight. Richter cuts through unearthly beings left and right. Maria uses her birds to send them back to the vampires, back to the afterlife, while Annette and Edouard just sort of do their thing too. Despite their resilience, they are heavily outnumbered and try to escape. Sadly, Edouard is not as fast as the rest of them and becomes vampire fodder, much to Annette's grief. He is then added to the barrel of bodies, which is transferred to an underground laboratory run by none other than the saintly abbot, Even hypocrisy has to take a stand when the abbot enters the room. The body of Edouard is placed in a crazy machine, which turns him into a hideous creature of the dark. Personally, though, I think it is an improvement. But don't tell Edouard I said that. Oh, wait. A mourning Annette cannot help but feel that Edouard's death is her fault, and that she should not have left him behind. The rest of the group attempts to comfort her, and she decides to open up about her origin story. Born in a family of slaves, young Annette's well-wisher was her mother, from shielding her from the punishing slave owners to giving her baths. That woman did everything for her, which is why her life drastically changed when the landlord, a cruel and merciless vampire named Vaublanc, killed her mother for performing spells in their house. Watching her mother die right in front of her eyes filled Annette with resentment for this oppressive lifestyle and vowed to put an end to it once and for all. She eventually reached the age of maturity, which is when slaves are branded with a flaming hot iron. When it was her turn, she says a "W hell nah," unlocks her elemental powers and escapes right under Vaublanc's huge and pointy nose. The vampire sends his guards and dogs after her, but Annette refuses to return to that life. She seeks refuge in a nearby town where she hides in an opera. Edouard was performing here, and this is when they make each other's acquaintance. Having always been treated as dirt, Annette can barely believe that someone so civilized would even talk to her. Edouard helps the slave girl escape to the mountains where they train together with a band of revolutionists. This is where Annette meets Cecile, the priestess, under whom she trains her elemental powers. Once they have collected enough numbers, the revolutionists attack the town, slaughtering slave owners and setting their fellow people free from the literal shackles of society. Our Black Queen has only one target, however: Vaublanc. Unfortunately, the vampire is way too skilled, and after knocking down both Edouard and the girl, he turns into a bat and flies away. Very vampire-y of him. During the celebrations of their successful revolution, Cecile falls to the ground, and clutching Annette foretells of a great catastrophe that shall soon arrive, beginning from France. She then directs Annette to travel there and meet with a boy named Belmont. Edouard agrees to accompany her. Wiping away her tears, Annette vows to avenge her friend, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, back at the abbot's palace, Ulrich infiltrates the royal grounds and disarms the nobleman's right-hand man. He then forces him to reveal the reason why the abbot is helping this so-called messiah by creating night creatures, to which the man explains that this new order has forced everyone to choose sides between pro-revolutionist or anti-revolutionist. Since there are no neutral sides, the abbot has decided to side with the one most likely to emerge victorious. This man needs to start reading his Bible to learn what happens with hypocrites. Ulrich hears him out with disgust, then disappears without a trace. Back in a dark corner of the underworld, Elizabeth Bathory explains to her representative in France that she has a wet dream in which all of the rulers of the world bow before her. Someone has a narcissism kink. The representative confirms that all arrangements for her arrival have been done, and this dream shall soon be a reality. Meanwhile, the revolutionists have begun the next stage of their plan. Maria introduces Annette to a group of their supporters, and our Black Queen begins to motivate them. Just as they all start to get hyped up, a bunch of night creatures show up and crash the party. However, the team is ready this time, and begins slicing up these creatures from hell, left, right, and center. Annette is about to get reduced to minced meat by an onrushing night creature when suddenly one of the demons steps in and saves her. The girl can barely believe it, and locking eyes with the being, she immediately recognizes it as Edouard. Before she can say anything, though, the other night creatures carry him away and retreat. This small glitch in his night creatures makes the abbot crazy. Leaning toward the tied-up Edouard, the manic priest screams at him, saying that his only duty now is to the abbot alone. In other news, cracks have started to appear among the revolutionists after the fiasco at the chateau. Annette demands that they all storm into the abbot's manor and free Edouard, but Richter refuses to do so without a plan in place. Our Black Queen begins to crash out, saying that the man is a coward and a child. Thankfully, before they could come to blows, Tara steps in and reveals that she knows a secret tunnel that leads right into the abbot's basement. Meanwhile, night creatures are not the weirdest shit going on, as it appears that Ulrich and the abbot's right-hand man are now friends with benefits. I mean, love is love, but seriously? Call me horny all you want, but I need to see how that works. Anyways, back to the story. In true male fashion, the abbot's guard gets up in the morning, leaving Ulrox's naked ass literally in bed, and goes to work. However, the vampire already has all the answers he needs. It seems that the abbot has formed an unlikely partnership with the self-proclaimed Messiah to bring down the revolutionists, but then plans to double-cross her with the night creatures he has created. In line with their arrangement, the Messiah's representative, who is referred to as Emissary Tsuentes, visits the abbot's church to get updates regarding the arrangements. Despite their partnership, these so-called men of God do not seem to look favorably upon the vampire, sending a few snide remarks towards the demon. Emissary is no wuss, and in true mean girl fashion puts the abbot and his guard in place. She then demands to take a look at the laboratory where the night creatures are created, and so she is led down into the church's dungeon. Coincidentally, who else is making their way to the dungeon? None other than the revolutionists. Well, call it a good old reunion. The two groups face each other in silence as Tara recognizes the abbot, who she had idolized for so many years. Having defended him against all allegations, she can barely believe her eyes that this man of God is nothing more than a fraud. To add even more spice to this meeting, Ulrox is in the laboratory right across, inspecting the machine the abbot uses to create the night creatures. A book on a nearby table catches his eye, and he realizes that it is about necromancy, and probably how the priest has learned to turn dead humans into these demons. Silently placing the book in his jacket, he then takes his leave. Meanwhile, Richard seems to have gone Super Saiyan. Being called a coward by Annette has triggered something inside of him, and he is slashing demons and vampires left, right, and center. The group seem to have underestimated Tara, whose fire ability sends the demonic creatures running for their lives. Annette finally finds Edouard, and with tears in her eyes, asks if she should kill him and put him out of his misery. However, this sends the night creature-man hybrid into fits of fear, and he rushes into a corner of his jail cell. Before she can comfort him, Emissary Tsuentes decides to keep her company, with Annette only barely dodging the woman's razor-sharp nails. Adrenaline rushing in his body, Richter announces that he would slay anyone who stands in his way. That is until Ulrox makes his appearance. The vampire recognizes the boy and slowly walks towards him. Richter begins to have severe PTSD, and in a frenzy of panic, he announces that the group has to retreat while running away. Maria, Tara, and Annette have no choice but to follow suit. As calm as ever, Ulrox introduces himself to Emissary Tsuentes, while informing her that the Messiah is expecting him. If brother was not balls deep in another guy, back at Tara's place, Maria inspects her injuries, among which is a particularly bad gash delivered by Emissary's formidable nails. Annette reveals one of her hidden abilities, and heals the wound in a matter of seconds, much to the surprise of the rest of the group. At the chateau, there is a funeral taking place for the nobleman that was beheaded by Richter. Weirdly enough, his wife's final request was to keep his head. Don't ask me what type of kink that is, I'm at a loss for words myself. That night, Tara and Maria are awoken by the sound of commotion in their house. Thinking that it was Richter returning, they rush outside only to find Annette ready to leave. She is intent upon returning to the manor and freeing Edouard, but Maria refuses to let the girl go alone. She convinces her to wait until Richter comes back, after which they will ambush the vampires with a plan. However, a determined Annette proceeds to leave the house and stalks the carriage carrying Emissary Tsuentes. The emissary meets up with Ulrox at a nearby cemetery, which is probably a popular makeout spot among the undead. The former tries to convince Ulrox to join the side of Messiah, who she insists would bring about a new world order in which vampires would rule at the pinnacle of society. Ever the cool customer, Ulrox dismisses this offer by saying that he would believe this so-called Messiah once he sees her with his own eyes. The two then depart. Annette finally lets out a deep breath that she had been holding for ages. The silence of the cemetery is broken by the anguished screams of a poor bloke who is about to become the main course for a hooded vampire. Annette steps in and, using her elemental powers, knocks the demon back, allowing enough time for the human to escape. When the vampire gets to his feet, it is revealed to be none other than Vaublanc. However, in stark contrast to their previous encounter, Annette does not freak out this time. Meeting the creature's eyes, she informs him that tonight's night would be his last. Vaublanc draws first blood by pushing the girl to the ground and strangling her, but Annette refuses to be overpowered. Using her elemental powers, she throws Vaublanc back and bends the nearby metal fence to turn into multiple crosses which she sets up around the vampire. Our Black Queen has definitely done her homework since Vaublanc's flesh burns whenever he touches crosses, meaning that he is completely trapped. He then tries to gaslight her by recounting her mother's death and her past, but Annette is locked in. As the sun begins to rise and the rays touch the demon, his flesh begins to burn, and in a matter of seconds, the once proud demon is nothing more than roasted chicken. Meanwhile, the abbot pays a visit to Tara's house. He attempts to clarify his side of the story, blaming the revolutionists for causing mayhem and bringing down the name of the church. However, neither Maria nor Tara are moved, and before leaving, the priest drops a huge bombshell by revealing to the girl that he is her father. Shocked and disgusted, Maria leaves the house immediately. Back in town, Richter is drowning his woes in alcohol. Sadly, the poor guy doesn't even have any money to pay for it, but then an old man in the corner offers to pay his tab. The boy goes over to thank him, but the old guy is anything but nice. The pub suddenly goes silent as a vampy-looking thug enters and announces that he is here for the old man. Ever the hero, Richter reaches for his whip, but the old guy has already taken hold of the whip and in a few minutes reduces the ruffian to sliced meat. Richter follows the old man outside and demands to know his identity, to which he reveals that he is from the Belmont family as well. Richter's grandfather, to be accurate. Talk about a small world, right? The very first proper appearance of the fearsome Erzsébet Bathory is nothing short of entertaining. Bearing an accent very much like an old Russian widow, she could probably be seen from miles out due to her bright red hair. The emissary welcomes her and announces that their finish line is very much in sight. You would think this Russian beldam has some personal beef with Ra, the sun god, the way she begins bitching about him. She is obviously jealous that he has been worshipped by people for centuries, and is intent upon bringing around a new age where all shall worship the moon instead. Can we just stop this worship stuff and let people live their lives? Erzsébet then announces that she is thirsty, and you would think that she would then be brought a glass of water, maybe a mint margarita, heck, even a Coke. But no, the emissary brings forth a young girl chosen by her, and the demon queen happily sinks her teeth into her neck, sucking out every drop of blood. At least get a room for God's sake. Back in town, Richter's grandfather leads him towards his small hut and reveals that he had once been the strongest member of the Belmont bloodline. He used to hunt vampires for a living, and such were his magical abilities that he did not even need the whip, which was the boy's primary weapon. The old geezer's downfall started when he watched his own wife, best friend, die at the hands and fangs of a vampire. Ever since that day, he lost his magic and became a shell of his former self. Looking up at the sky, Richter's grandfather gives him some true words of motivation. Evil always wins, and no matter what, good shall never prevail. Yeah, you heard that right, folks. Seems like the loss of his family has hit Granddad right in the head, and he has given up on life entirely. Already going through too much emotionally and mentally, Richter cannot handle it anymore and begins aggressively sobbing. In true male fashion, his grandfather just sits beside him and watches him silently. When the meltdown gradually comes to an end, Gramps just gets up and announces he needs to pee. Like most normal men conversations. Meanwhile, Annette is going through a turmoil of her own. By performing a sacred ritual, she transports her body to the spiritual plane where she discusses her problems with Cecile, the priestess. Richter gets thrown some unnecessary shade as Annette calls him useless, but the priestess attempts to calm her down. She advises the young woman to take example from her ancestors who did not give up no matter what hardship they were faced with. Annette recalls how strong her mother was despite how difficult their lives were, and her heart begins to soften. It seems as if all of the members of the revolution are going through some dramatic character arc as Maria confronts the abbot at his manor. She demands to know why he had abandoned her for all these years, and why he would commit adultery when it is clear it is a sin. The abbot is at a loss for words, and can only offer his hand to the girl to join the church and save herself. Obviously, Maria views this offer with disdain and walks away. The crowd at the center of the town suddenly begins cheering as a carriage carrying Erzsébet Bathory enters, drawn by a magnificent stallion and wearing a dark shade of pink on her lips. The Demon Queen is filled with pride at this welcome. A few kilometers away from the town center, Richter is taken by a surprise ambush as Erzsébet's henchmen surround him in the forest. They have captured his grandfather as well, leaving him with no choice but to take on the entire gang on his own. Sadly, the poor boy is beaten to a pulp and forced down to his knees, and just when it seems that death is inevitable, our hero finally unlocks his magical powers. With fists of ice, he smashes the demons and sends them back to their underworld one by one. His grandfather can only watch in awe as his grandson does what he had been doing for many years before. With the unlocking of his new abilities, it seems that Richter's inner turmoil has come to an end, and he is ready to join the rest of the revolutionists. The undead sure do love their parties. In honor of Erzsébet's return, the entire team of demons throw a huge ball in which they dress up in their gowns and have a merry old time. For all the hatred they have for humans, they sure love to copy them. Even the Demon Queen joins in, sharing a dance with an unfortunate human partner. Meanwhile, Maria still hasn't forgiven her mother for hiding the true identity of her father. In trying to earn her daughter's forgiveness, she tells Maria that she actually did love the abbot, but if news got out that the priest had impregnated a woman, their lives would have been destroyed. However, Maria is not having any of it, and Tara walks back home. On the way, she is ambushed by Erzsébet's henchmen, and hearing the commotion, Maria joins in the fight. They are outnumbered, though, and just as it seems that they might get captured or even killed, Richter announces his return in heroic style, reducing the demons to frozen icicles. The two are delighted at his safety, and even more amazed that he has added magic to his arsenal. Bro has good looks, a cool-ass whip, and now magic too? Leave some hoes for the rest of us, man. Back at the Undead Ball, Ulrox finally has his meeting with the self-proclaimed god and devourer of light. He does not appear to be as scared and tense around her as the rest of the vampires, and even refuses to bow to her, despite the emissary's constant reminders. Erzsébet shows off her orb of energy, which she says would end light on the earth once and for all, and that once she is done with taking over France, Ulrox would act as her guide into America, since he has lived there before. All these demands and commands piss Ulrox off, but he knows that he needs to stay hidden in the darkness for now. Unwillingly, he bows to the Demon Queen and announces his fake loyalty. If there is one member of the revolutionists who is not overjoyed at Richter's return, it is Annette. She turns away when he comes home, and the boy decides to apologize personally so that harmony may once again reign in the group. However, once he explains himself, Annette then shows off her relief that he is safe, and the two share a small tender moment. Wake up, guys. There is no time for love. Vampires are planning to kill the sun. In other news, Erzsébet has finally found out the abbot's one weakness and decides to use it against him to gain his loyalty. Summoning him to the terrace, she announces that he has to sacrifice his daughter Maria in his beloved church if he hopes to be a part of the new world. The abbot's right-hand man, Mizrak, is shocked that the priest has disobeyed such a high holy order and had a child in secret. The abbot is at a loss for words as well, as he tries to think of a way around this. Back at the revolutionists' headquarters, aka Tara's house, the group plan to raid the abbot's manor for the last time and find out how he is creating the night creatures. Ulrox makes an unexpected appearance, much to Richter's fury, but before his body is torn into two, he informs the group of the machine the abbot uses for his necromancy and lends them the book he stole from his laboratory, before disappearing. That night, Maria sneaks into the abbot's church and insists that her father escape, since the inevitable battle might mean the end for him. It almost looks like the abbot is about to change his mind when he suddenly summons his night creatures, who take his daughter hostage. Meanwhile, Erzsébet Bathory is not here to mess around. Although she has only been back for a couple of hours, she decides to show off her power for all to see. Using the orb, she pulls the moon on top of the sun, sending darkness in every corner of the earth. With a menacing laugh, she then announces the beginning of her reign. During this time, the revolutionists are running towards the church, since Mizrak has informed them of Maria's capture. But they are stopped in their tracks as they watch the sun being covered up like sunglasses on a sunny day. Taking energy from the eclipse, Erzsébet powers up to a whole new level, ditching her old Russian beldam outfit for a gown befitting an Egyptian princess. Her face also transforms into one of a lion, as she embodies the spirit of Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess of war. The revolutionists calm themselves down after watching the sun go into hibernation, and remind each other that their mission is not yet over. Together with Mizrak, they take down the guards of the city and break into the church, where the abbot is in the middle of sacrificing Maria by re-performing a biblical act. Tara intervenes, and using her elemental powers, she throws back the lunatic priest and frees her daughter. With that done, the group move into phase 2 of their plan, in which Tara would recite a passage from the Necromancer's book, which would open a portal to hell, into which Annette would use her abilities to push the machine. While this is being done, Richter and Maria would keep our good friends, the night creatures, busy. Unfortunately, a guest in the form of Emissary Tsuentes joins them, which makes the fight quite a lot tougher. But this new, upgraded version of our hero Richter puts the female vampire in metaphoric chokehold with his whip, which he has also powered up with his elemental fire. Just as it seems the good guys would finally win, the party pooper takes center stage. Enter Erzsébet Bathory in her new guise. Her very presence sends shockwaves through the church, which brings Tara back to consciousness from her recitation. As a result, the portal to hell closes and their plan comes to a halt. Erzsébet has her eyes on Maria, and as she walks towards the young girl, Tara intervenes between the two. After watching her comrades try and fail to land even a blow on this monstrous force of nature, she knows that there is only one way to save her daughter. Erzsébet wishes to turn Maria into a vampire, but Tara insists that she would take her child's place. Tears flow down the abbot's eyes as he realizes the mess he has gotten his family into. Tara's final image as a human is watching Richter carry out her daughter to safety. The vampire genes soon take over, and before you know it, the poor woman has joined the legion of the undead. With everything going wrong, Richter begins to feel that his grandfather was right, and that the good guys actually do always lose. The emissary tracks them down, and just as she is about to deliver the final killing blow to our lovable protagonist, a mysterious young man with pure white hair appears and strikes his sword right into her little vampire heart, reducing her body to an ashen corpse. The man announces himself as Alucard, the son of Dracula. His very appearance sends the minor demons running for their lives. He locks eyes with Richter and apologizes for being late to the party. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell to be notified of any latest uploads. That said, see you in the next one.